Everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. My name is Joe Groh. I'm part of International Men's Day. First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a happy International Men's Day. And if you'd like more information on International Men's Day, you're welcome to look on Wikipedia. There's a long list of information. And I'm usually hosting an author circle that's happening, but today I'm hosting a comedy show. So be prepared. We're going to have a great time today. We've got some great comedians on today. And just to tell you a little bit about who we are, Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing a tremendous need, stepping up to provide services to help support and overcome men's and boys' life challenges. We're part of International Men's Day, and International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years and so far 90 countries around the world, joined together and doing various activities regularly. International Men's Day follows 6 pillars, which is the overall well-being of boys and men. We follow in the same footsteps. And we'd like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith toward peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness to the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We're not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you to contact a medical professional immediately. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us info@voiceofmen360.org. And we're excited to have an exciting comedy show today. Perhaps some of you may have heard the saying that laughter is the best medicine. In Proverbs, a merry heart doth good medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. There are 2 great books I'd recommend. Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins. He cured himself of cancer by watching comedy movies, and as well, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. In his book, he wrote, humor is another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. It's well known that humor, more than anything else, is a human makeup, can afford an aloofness and ability to rise above any situation, even if only for a few seconds. And from my experiences, I've found it necessary to really listen deeply to other people since there's so much to learn from each other. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should actually do twice as much listening as talking. There's so much to learn from each other. There's so many different cultures and languages. And if I don't listen carefully, then the meaning is misinterpreted. Let me give you a few quick examples. A few years ago, I was on the way to Hamilton, Ontario, driving on Highway 6, and I stopped at a coffee time restaurant to use a washroom. When I came out, I noticed some nice apple ginger donuts. I asked the gentleman behind the glass case about the apple spice donuts and asked him, how old are these donuts? And he replied with an Indian accent. He said, 2 days. I exclaimed, 2 days? I don't want no 2-day-old donuts. He said, 2 days. I again repeated, 2 days? Oh, wow, I don't want no 2-day-old donuts. And he repeated, no, sir, 2 days. Then I understood he meant 2 days, Todays. And I was thinking Twodas. I also had an interesting coincidence happened shortly afterwards. I went into a fine men's clothing store. I asked the salesperson, if I bought 3 suits, how long is your layaway plan? He said 2 days. I answered, what kind of layaway plan is that? Also went to a renovation store and asked, how long will it take for delivery? He said 2 days. I'm going, there's something about 2 days. I had another interesting situation a while ago. I went with a friend of mine to Westmount Rose, which is near here, and he usually goes by the Kissing Bridge. There's a picnic table. He relaxes. I met him there, and he said, normally it's very quiet here, but not when I met him there. There was 150 people across the river having a wedding. Every 20 minutes, a Corvette sports car would drive by. People were constantly coming by. A man and woman drove by on their bikes and asked if they could share the picnic table with us. Well, we agreed. They had at least 5 bags attached to their bikes. They had crackers, apples, salmon in the bags. They had a black. Then it was weird what happened. A black Honda stopped by. 3 guys got out of it, left their car doors open, came over to us, to ask us, do you know where we can find a sheep? I replied them, you won't find a sheep here. This is a river. You need to go to the ocean. You'll only get a small boat or raft on this little river. Now, obviously, I'm misinterpreting their accent. They repeated another 3 times. We want a sheep. James finally understood and he said, I think there's a farmer down the road, then you can get a sheep. I thought they meant a ship. So we really need to listen carefully to the accents or we misinterpret what they're saying. Also, I had an interesting experience at a coffee shop going through the drive-thru late at night. My intention was to get a chamomile tea. Since I was staying at a hotel away from home, I was with Shireen. We ordered a chamomile tea and a hot chocolate drink. We drove through the drive-thru to the window, placed the order, and noticed that the chamomile tea order didn't show up on the screen. So I exclaimed, "Where's the chamomile tea?" A very nice, sweet East Indian girl voice showed up and said she didn't hear me at first and she would add it on the order. I got to the window to pay and she said, "I'm so sorry, sir. Is my voice audible to you?" I was in a state of shock and I wasn't sure what to say. I thought she had a very nice, sweet voice. I said to myself, I don't want to hurt her feelings and admit to her their voice was horrible. So I said nothing to her, but she repeated very apologetically. And other 3 more times, she kept asking me, "Sir, is my voice horrible to you?" Finally, I understood what she was asking me. She was asking me if my voice was audible to you. Audible. I thought she was asking her voice was horrible. So we had a good laugh. I called a restaurant, Hong Kong restaurant, and I was going to order some food for my friend and I, chicken chow mein, wonton soup, and chop suey. He asked, "Okay, how many people you want?" I said, 2 people. I asked, "Okay, how long would it take?" He said, 4 months. I called our head office in Shanghai. I thought I called the Kitchener, Ontario, Canada number. How long will it take for delivering the food? 4 months. And he said, I asked him, how's it going to get here? He said, by ship, of course. Check the phone number next time. And I'm going, this is unbelievable. And I'm going, as you're attending our comedy show, you notice that we're going to have people from all over the world. There's people from Mumbai, India. We have some people from Scotland as well. We've got some people here from Ireland. Actually, some people have asked me if I'm American. And I said, "No, I'm not from America. You sound like you're from Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, land of Georgia." "No, I'm Canadian." They ask, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Toronto." And I've been asked too from Italiano. And they go, "You sound like you're an Italian guy." "No, my name is Joe Giuseppe. Someday I'll become an Italian boy." So we've got people from all over the place. When you're in Canada, you know you need to speak the French language since this is our second language in Canada. I've been asked too, and the people say, "Are you Russian?" "No, I'm a German boy, just like my friend Arnold. You know, we're going to pump you up, turn you into a cybernetic organism, metal underneath, flesh over top." And before we start our show, I really need to give a word to one of our sponsors. You know, as a man, you want to feel fresh while you're taking a shower. And we'll make sure that you need to stock up on Voice of Men 360 Body Wash. It will keep you feeling fresh and invigorated for 23 hours because no man wants to feel alone all day. We give you an hour that you can be on your own. You know, I want to introduce, we have a comedian, a guest here. His name is Mike Cotayo. And Mike has been captivating audiences for over 20 years. His style is a blend of high energy, performance, quick wit, and engaging crowd work. In just 24 years, Mike competed and won amateur night at the Apollo. He then went on to be awarded top comedian in the Philadelphia Pride Comedy Festival 2017. He quickly became a regular at the Laugh Factory in Times Square, joined the Short Bus Comedy Tour soon after. He got sober for the first time in 2007, is proud to be celebrating 15 years clean and sober today. Without further ado, Mike, come on and give us a great show.
Yes, I didn't notice. So I apologize for that. How are you doing?
Awesome.
It's good to be here. Joe, I love your accents. I can't do accents. So I really appreciated hearing you do all of that. Today, I am celebrating 15 years clean and sober, which I'm very excited about. So I might celebrate by having a drink later. Feel free to join me. So let's see. I am disabled. I'm physically disabled, right? And I was in a car accident when I was in a drunk driving accident when I was 18 months old. I know, who gives a toddler the keys? Crazy, right? Um, and then like I don't know. It all went downhill from there. I was in a coma, and that was the best nap of my life. Oh, 2 weeks. I'm saying all I want's another coma. Life is hard. And let's see. So when I was drinking and drugging, like crack was my drug of choice, and I loved crack. I loved crack like Oprah loves bread. Oh man, crack was the best. I'm not saying you should ever try it, but you gotta try it. If you do it 3 times. That's how you know whether or not you like it. No, I wouldn't recommend that. It's not a good look. I don't know if you could see this, but this is my left hand. I cannot use my left hand. It looks like I'm always gonna be a waiter. That's what my arm looks like right now. Um, and so I can't use my left hand, and it makes for interesting. I gotta tell you guys, it took a lot of dedication to be a one-handed crackhead. A lot. You have to balance the pipe in your mouth. You gotta hold it. You gotta tilt your head back so the rock doesn't fall out. And then you gotta have good hand-eye coordination. It's exhausting. People never believe me when I said I had a drug problem. They're like, come on, Mike, you're fine. Come on, have a drink with us. Come on, have one drink, you're fine. No, because if I have one drink with you, next thing you know, I'm in a subway station, smoking crack, sucking dick for money. And if I'm sucking dick, I don't want to be doing it for money, because then it feels like a job to me. And I don't want to be working while I'm smoking crack. You see, I got priorities. Uh, I am married now to a wonderful woman, and I love being married because dating sucked. Dating was hard for me because I never knew if they liked me for me or they were just in it for the parking spaces. You know, they're good spaces. Come Black Friday, I'm the sexiest guy on the block. My wife and I have cute little nicknames for each other. She calls me Blue Eyes. I call her Two Hands. Uh, and we at our wedding was beautiful. We got married during the pandemic, and I gotta tell you guys, it was the most beautiful wedding up until the DJ introduced us into the hall. He goes, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. and Mrs. Michael Janvier. You guys, that's not my last name. My last name's Cotayo. That's my wife's ex-husband's last name. So they called us by her ex-husband's last name. And now I gotta change my name. It's awkward. I don't mind changing my name. He's a good guy. I don't mind being a Janvier. I might as well take his last name. I mean, I took his wife. So I have his last name, right? I have his last name. And so we did what anybody would do. We had him come live with us. He lives in our basement. That is not a joke. He lives in our basement, and what's funny is we get along great. We're like best buds. As far as brother husbands go, he's amazing. My wife hates when I call him my brother husband, but to call him an Eskimo brother would be even worse. So I think brother husband's a notch up on the belt. If you don't know what an Eskimo brother is, it comes from the term when you have both been inside the same woman. I got dirty real fast. It's too dirty for 11:40 Eastern time. I don't know what I was thinking. So let's see. What else can I tell you guys about myself? I was a therapist for about 20 years, 15 years, 2010 to now. So 10, 12 years. And I quit recently to pursue stand up full time. And, you know, being a therapist was hard work. I worked with the chronically suicidal and I helped them get over their feelings of suicide. And it made me feel really good about myself till like the fourth or fifth time it happened. Then I was like, dude, just do it. Really, it's not worth it. You're stressing me out. You know what? I could help. We'll take you down to the subway. Look at the way I walk. I'll say I tripped. It's no big deal. You know what? I'm joking. I would never do that. But you know what I learned is there are some things you should never say to someone who is suicidal. I like Nike's slogan, just do it. Get back in the car. Just go ahead and kill yourself already. Wah, you got problems. I'm a very compassionate person, as you could tell. I loved being a social worker because I got to work with the craziest of people, and I was really good at it. I had the reputation for taking on the craziest people. When I would meet with schizophrenics, we would compare voices. That's what I did because, you know, crazy knows crazy. So what did they tell you? Get out that. I listened to what my guy told me. So you guys, let's see. This has been so much fun. So much fun. I love Voice of Men 360. It's a great organization. I want to get more and more involved with it. And you know, I want to end by saying there was this one time I walked into this pizzeria, and I gotta tell you guys, it was like walking into this bizarro pizzeria. I walked up to the counter to order a slice, and in walked this guy behind me who had the exact same problem as me, but on the opposite side. I was like, oh my God, you complete me. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Good day. Maybe I'm supposed to keep talking. I don't know. Tell me about yourselves. Silent screen. Okay, so no one's coming back. I thought my time was up. So what else do you guys want to know about me? There we go. Hi, everybody. You know, may I make a suggestion? It may be better to have everyone off of silence so that the comedian can hear the laughs.
I agree.
Because it really messes up with timing and everything.
Yeah. Yo, you killed it though. You're so funny.
Thank you. I felt like I was floundering because I heard no laughter.
Oh man, I was dying. I was loving it.
Thank you, Anto. You're muted, Joe.
We've got another comedian coming up. If we've got a video for him, Sivam, are you ready with him?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay, so let me give an introduction. Before that, we need to have another word from our sponsor. So we've got Voice of Men 360 deodorant, and it's perfect because it'll keep you fresh and invigorated for 23 hours because all men deserve some time for themselves. Very important. So our second comedian coming up is Stuart Ellis-Myers. He has a keynote kickstarted over 800 conferences. Now is the time for peace of mind to gauge Stuart to laugh where you learning partner at your next pandemic event.
If you can do that, you will see TripAdvisor scores going.
Okay, so we're a little ahead there. He's a mental health speaker and expert who has spent a lifetime uncontrollably twitching 30 million times while apprenticing and mastering how to inspire others to overcome mental health challenges. So during intensive life-saving therapy, he received a crystal clear epiphany to create a mental health for life GPS. He's written a book called Unstoppable, and in the book, he overcomes the ravages of Tourette syndrome and all the disabling mental conditions so often accompany it, and become remarkably successful in both his keynote speaking career and his personal life. So what is holding any of us back from achieving our dreams is he's going to be discussing that. And let's hear from Stuart Ellis-Myers.
Through the roof. Let me ask you this about social media. Why do you think YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, why do you think they'll never merge? It's because if they did, they'd be called You Twitface. And you're laughing. Now let me ask you this, she who's laughing. I live with the rare neurological disorder Tourette syndrome. And if you've been watching me for the last few minutes, you're probably thinking to yourself, there's something just not right about that boy.
No, I'm thinking.
Oh, hold on, photo op. Hold on, photo op. All right, there we go. Fantastic. So just to let you know, the great thing about Tourette's, there's two types, okay? One's catching, and now you've got it. So why are you pulling away? Why are you pulling away? Let me tell you about Tourette syndrome. How do I best explain this? Because I'm 56, and it hit me when I was about 8 years old. It's like having a black box that sits inside of you, and what it does is it just pours out massive amounts of anxiety and OCD. Every single moment of my life, I feel as if my world is going to come to an end. It doesn't, and then it doesn't, and it's going to come to an end, and it doesn't. And I know it sounds crazy, but because of this rare neurological disorder, that's how my life feels all the time. And what happens is the anxiety builds up to the point where all of a sudden, if I do this, and by the way, I call this the chicken slap. And have you heard the word twitch? A twitch is a singularity. It isn't. It's sound and it's movement and it's song. And what it allows us with Tourette's to do is if we're feeling anxious or stressed or depressed or just, out of control a bit, what we're able to do is go, and we do that, and then everything comes back to normal. Okay? And what's interesting about this is, imagine you have a mum and dad. You're a mum and dad, and you have your child, and it's perfect in all ways. My father was a dentist, my mother was a teacher. And then around the age of 8, your child starts to do this and doesn't sleep well and gets angry, and also at school looks under his shoe like this. So, you know what kids are like at school, they're really honest. They call me dog poo stew. Ho, ho, for obvious reasons. All I can tell you is that, you learn to live with a rare neurological disorder. And it seems to me that everyone today is dealing with some sort of anxiety-based disorder. Does that make sense? Because you see all this puppetry, but it's all of the anxiety and stuff that happens on behind me. And here, let me ask you this. How many of you have one of these? A smartphone? Well, I promise you this. If you have a smartphone, you have Tourette's. Can I prove that to you? Because what happens if you don't pick this up? What happens? Doesn't it call to you? Doesn't it say, hey, I've probably got an email for you? There are people out there today who are checking this and living this. They check this anywhere between 100 and 200 times a day. Not only between the hours of 8 and 8, they get up at midnight, and some of you know what I'm talking about. You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're doing this. So do you understand that I have Tourette's? So I have to, by the way, all my Tourette's, all my twitches you might want to notice are all on the right-hand side of my body, not the left. Who knows why? So maybe I've just got half the Tourette's. But so mine stuff is all on this side. And don't you do the same thing? When I do this, all my anxiety goes away. And doesn't it happen for you? You've got the phone here. The longer you leave it, and then you pick it up, and you go, So do you see? This is my twitch, and this is yours. And by the way, you're probably thinking to yourself, why does this guy not twitch? So why does this guy not swear? Only 10% of us swear. And it's the same thing with you, because when you pick this up, normally once out of 10 times, when the boss calls, you go, oh, shoot. So there you go. As far as I'm concerned, you've all got Tourette syndrome.
Rush, 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 rush. This is the common human experience of today. And what I would love to share with you is, think about the amount of spam just coming at you constantly. And all of that stuff, information, which is sort of just overloading and just never ending. If we think about it that way, it just kind of drives us nuts. How about the number of phone calls that you get, which you just want to press that button and go, oh, just leave me alone for 5 minutes. So, with that said, what I'd love to share with you that I'm actually proud to be a Canadian. And I've been here for about 45 years. I love this country. And what I'd love to do is to share with you something called the Defender. It's inside of your brain. Think of it as a hockey goalkeeper, goaltender. And here's what happens, is what he or she is going to do, that's this little defender inside of your brain, is going to do everything that it can possibly do to stop the information that I'm going to share with you. Each little puck that I'm going to send at you, it's going to go, nope, because that's what it naturally needs to do. Because so much, if you took all the information in that was coming at you, your brain, I think, would explode. So here is what I'm going to do over this presentation. I'm going to slap shot, slap shot, slap shot, slap shot, slap shot. And there's a good chance that a few of my hockey pucks are going to get through. And when they do, those are the ones you need to take a look at. What I'd like to do now is to show you a resource which is literally right underneath your nose, because it's here right underneath your nose and it's your smartphone. And what I'd like you to do is to leave your depressed self a video of you when the depression is gone, when the depression has abated, because very much anxiety and depression can be like a tide. But when that tide comes in and it feels like you're 400 feet under the water, it feels like you can't move, and you truly believe in that moment it's never going to end. The best person to break you out of that is you. So what you do is you literally leave yourself a message saying, hey, I understand where you are. I know what's going on, but it's a lie. It's not real. In fact, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, me and 3 mates, we're all about 160, we went dry fly fishing. And for me, that is just, it's an antidepressant in itself. But here's the video of which I created for myself and use regularly, because when I get into a deep depression, this is one of the tools of many of which I will show you, which works. This is a video from my happy self to my depressed self. That is my friend John Barlow in the background, and he has a fish on. And he's playing it right now. So Stuart, remember, the next time you're completely depressed, there are moments of magic like this where you get out into a place where you just feel like, quite honestly, it feels like church. It feels like connecting with everything which is good. And there's John. It looks like the fish got off. So maybe he's in a sad place right now. But Stuart, remember, I understand you're completely depressed, but remember, I'm here for you, mate. I'm inside of you right now. And we've got this wonderful moment here, absolutely captured live, which we're going to share with the world, with my friend John, fishing. And I'm going to get back to it right now because there's fish out there. So Stewie, if you're depressed, mate, remember, I'm inside of you and I will never, ever, ever let you down. Let's get back to fishing. Did you know that when most people come to Western Canada, that's where I live up in the Canadian Rockies, everybody wants to see one of these? So let me ask you a question, and it's all about embracing anxiety. When you hear the word bear, do you think of a grizzly bear wanting to rip your head off? Or do you think of a little bear that you can pick up and you can do this to? It's just a habit, it's just a choice. And you know what? It's based on our upbringing and all of the unresolved issues of which we have experienced along the way of our life into now, this present moment. So, if we're going to absolutely embrace anxiety and literally allow it to fall through us like rain, what I'd like you to do is to think back to your days of being a child. I want you to think back to when your imagination was unparalleled. It was infinite. And how you love to get lost in a book. I read to my grandson, and you can see him, and he just absolutely loves his books. He's got his favorites, and knows all the bits and pieces in it. And so come with me on a journey, but what I'd love you to do is to literally call upon your imagination. And in the moment of doing that, believe that you can take castles and make them float. And as a Canadian who has ADD, so I'm just going to go right off and then come back to the same story, is we're very proud of the fact that we have icebergs. And on the east coast around Newfoundland in the summer, you can see them float by. And they've been doing that for the last 10 or 20 years. And the interesting thing about icebergs is, well, number one, it's a very cold and hospitable place to be, but it's also the perfect metaphor for us to understand that we are like icebergs. We've got the conscious part up top, and then most of us lives in our subconscious. And this is something of which I've never really shared with anybody outside of my family. And it's this, is there have been many times in my life where I've had to deal, when I go to sleep, of just having awful nightmares, just constantly. And it really sort of, you know what? I felt like I was in a war zone. How do you best explain it? You always sort of felt naked and bruised, and there was barbed wire everywhere. And if there's a common denomination of you waking up kind of, you know, feeling with all these nasty negative dreams and thoughts, then stick with me. Because what I'd love to do is to make you unstoppable in that moment when you first start to wake up from those nightmares. And here's what I'd love for you to do. I'd love you to think about Peter Pan. And I'd love you to think about Neverland. And we all have the capacity inside of us. When we're first waking, what's really happening is, you know, our sleeping state is merging with our physical state. And that's a very, very powerful moment that we can actually use and leverage. Because in that moment, we're free. We're just a point of observation. Even though we're in a really, really nasty place, what we can do is we can float out of it. And I remember just becoming incensed. And you know what? I was no longer passively allowing these dreams to come into my head. So when these monsters started, you know, showing up, what I did first thing in the morning as I was waking up is I put a light on. And then what I did is, I know it sounds crazy, but I put some headphones on. And the word that came to me was dance. And every time that these monsters would come into my head, I'd say, no, I'm done with you. Dance. And with the music, you know, some dance music on it, and with my eyes closed, I literally started to turn my dreams and my anxiety inside out, to the point where, you know, I get them to do different moves and, you know, even do the pirouette. And what was interesting, every day that I did this, those dreams, those nightmares, all that negativity literally started just slowly. And that's the key. It doesn't happen overnight. It just slowly. It was like shaving bits off or turning the volume down. And it was a tremendous experience. And by the way, let's talk about triggers. In fact, I loved horses. Here's a horse named Trigger. Hey, Trigger. Here, boy. See, he even responds to his name. But please understand that we've got billions and billions of neurons inside of our brains where we hold all of these unresolved issues in the format of triggers. And it can be a smell, it can be a thought. Have you ever been in a car at, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, minding your own business, and all of a sudden some unresolved issue or something, you know, comes up, you know, unannounced, and it just boom, and it triggers you into maybe for the next 15 or 20 minutes reliving something which was nasty. Here is the awareness gift that I would love to share with you. And it's this. If those triggers go off, where do you think the bullets go? Where they go is right into your conscious brain. And this is what they do. They start to pollute your thoughts with anger and angst and anxiety. And once it's in there, it's like a tsunami, and you can't push against it. Because if you do, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So here's what I would love for you to consider doing. I'd love you to consider being a surfer. So when all these huge storms and waves come at you, all you really need to do is to imagine that you have a surfboard and then get on up. And what I'd love you to do is to go surfing in your brain. And then once you have learnt how to surf on that anxiety and got your balance, once you've got that down, even if you just get a little bit every single day, you will over time get to the point where you can be free. You can put a big old smile on your face, and you can know that any time that you get anxious, you can basically take a surfboard and get to it. So the one last thought I want to leave with you when it comes to anxiety is this, and it was a revelation for me, and it was a simple one. I think it has to be. Well, I'm simple. Is 90% of everything that we worry about never ever happens. The worst part for me when I was at school was the bullying. I mean, it was natural. I mean, I was the kid with Tourette's and all the rest of it. The crazy part was the anticipatory anxiety came when not knowing what part of the day, I was going to get bullied. And what was interesting was every time that I did, i.e. the bullying was in the present moment, I could actually deal with it. It was as if there was a relief. It's finally here. I don't have to anticipate it anymore. So understand this. 90% of everything that you worry about is anticipatory, and it ain't going to happen. It dreams, and it's just, bad thoughts in your head. The other 10%, which is going to hurt, is there's no way that we can really figure out what that is. So there, try that. Minimize your anxiety from a level 10 to at least a level 1. And go through your notes on this part of the presentation and then say, what can I do to stop white knuckling it at night? And I remember a client telling me who suffers from stress and anxiety. And every night she goes home and she does this. And for her, I dedicate this part of the presentation on how to embrace and send anxiety on its way out, gone, 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 gone. It seems to me that just about everyone today has lost their sense of humor. It's a post-pandemic world. And we're moving in a wide variety of different areas in our lives where a sense of humor is normally the first thing to go flying out the door. Let's talk about masks. Most people were digging in, going, yes, I'll do it, no, I won't. And with a sense of humor, my suggestion is to take a look at like a mask like this, as an opportunity not to get mad or angry or to dig into right and wrong thinking. Instead, go out and put $10 or $20 into an investment so you can become the world's best puppeteer. Now, I just bought this at the store and I have no idea how to use it, so let's see what happens. How about this? So, all of you people out there, I'm Mrs. Doubtfire, and I've come back as a werewolf. I want to tell you all to have a sense of humour. So, try it. 1, 2, 3. When was the last time you ever... that's it. He's gone now. That's right, he's gone. I've taken over. Ha ha ha. So there you go. Probably a bit insane, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And so will you.
Hey, that was fantastic. I took a few notes there. I don't know how many people took advantage of writing notes, but I love the idea of creating a video when you're in your happy mode. In his case, it was fishing, and creating it, talking to your depressed self that you can watch if you're depressed, down and lonely and sad. And there's maybe some people say they never get depressed, but they'll lie about other things too. And I love the idea of dancing the monsters away. It's a great idea. And the surfer. And 90% of what we worry about never happens. Anticipatory, when you say that, anticipatory anxiety, 90% never happens. So there's some great ideas. And I did recognize a few people in the audience that had the red nose, because I had one of those red noses too. So we've got some other interesting things happening. But before we continue, we definitely need to hear another word from our sponsor. So we have Voice of Men 360 body wash. And this is an important thing to have because of the fact that we all want to feel fresh when we're taking a shower, don't you? So you need to make sure you stock up on Voice of Men 360 body wash. It'll keep you feeling fresh and invigorated for 23 hours, because us men all deserve some time for ourselves. So our third comedian coming up today is Anto Chan. He's a founding artist of intergenerational spoken word. He's a stand-up comedian. I'm sure he sits down sometimes. I think he's sitting today. He's a poet, storyteller. Anton is a performance artist, writer, producer, caregiver, facilitator. He has been featured on Fresh Rice Comedy, Rise, Poetry, and CBC's The National. His chapbook, Love So Far, Romantic Reflections, was released in 2020. He produced a 13th Story Dare Storytelling, just finished a successful run for his show Intergenerational Trauma and Healing on CTV News Toronto. He continues to create meaningful works in comedy, poetry, and storytelling that center around his journey of growth, self-love, and healing intergenerational trauma. So without further ado, come on up, Anton. We can't hear you, Anton. You're frozen there.
Ooh.
Yes.
Is this going? Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here. So
That
take
always
as long as
happens.
you need, because we're running late today. So take as long as you need. Let us have it with all your awesome humor.
All right. You could also, I would love it if anybody who's in the live stream now just stays on audio, just so I can hear you all laugh. It is awesome to be here. Of course, technical difficulties happens right when you throw it to me, but I am so happy that it all worked out. It's all good. So one of the things that I always love to share about myself is how I was born. And we're starting right from the beginning, right? And it's so interesting because my mom always tells me how I was a problem child before I was even born. I have no idea how that happens, but that's what she told me. She said that before I was born, 1 week before, when she went in to see the doctor actually told her that it's going to be an easy birth, Mrs. Chan. That's what she said, right? Easy birth, which I don't even know if that's a possibility. Like, an easy birth sounds difficult already. Any birth should be difficult, right? But then 1 week after that, what ends up happening was that the doctor ends up saying, Mrs. Chan, we just did an ultrasound. Your baby, me, is completely upside down. There's going to be a breech baby, and we're going to have an emergency C-section. It's literally the opposite, complete opposite of what an easy birth would be, right? And then so she ended up having to have like a C-section, and she's describing all of this to me like when we're at dim sum, right? And dim sum is already a wonderful place, but some of the food items look like the things that she was describing that was coming out of the C-section situation. I'm like, Mom, this is not the time for this, right? And then so she ends up like describing it. Oh, they had to like C-section, cut out, pulled you out of her in that way or whatever. And very difficult, right? But then the doctor, when he ended up cutting my mom for the C-section, what happened was he ended up cutting my butt as well. So now on the left cheek of mine here, there's a lightning bolt scar on there. Or as a lot of people will note, Harry Potter scar. I'll have people yell that at me sometimes when they see it. And then, but the thing is, I was actually born before Harry Potter. So Harry Potter actually has an Anto Chan ass scar on his forehead. That's what Harry Potter has. So that's the thing, is that a lot of people will say that I got it from him. Nope, other way around, completely the other way around. So, but another thing that I would love to share with everybody out there is some of the stresses that came with being a Chinese kid. So growing up, it was already very difficult, you know, like being very different from all the, I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. So much more white people in the audience or in my classes, in the people I knew, all the people I was performing for. So for me, it was hard to find like an identity that I connected with, right? But there was a lot of polite, kind people, you know, but a lot of the conversations I noticed as people talk about Canadian things that people do. So a lot of sorries. But the thing is, there's a lot of people saying sorry, but not a lot of people apologizing. Whenever I would work and stuff like that, people would do something wrong. They would say, sorry, sorry, sorry. And then I would be like, all right, like, and they were like, but that is my apology, right? And they're very different things, you know, not to get too technical, but like sorry is something that a lot of people say surfacely, and an apology is taking responsibility for a mistake that you've made, right? So that's not something that I felt was very common in Ottawa. Everybody's just throwing sorries around and everything. But I also was doing this as well. Another thing that I noticed that was very interesting, all anybody ever wanted to talk about was the weather. It didn't matter if I was good friends with somebody, I would just talk about the weather all the time, right? It was just like, oh, and the intricacies of the weather is so interesting of what you could talk about, right? You're like, oh, what a beautiful day out. You don't just say it's sunny either. You're like, oh, it's so sunny out. I really love that. My favorite is when it gets a little bit hot, and then I notice that there's a nice breeze. And whenever you bring up breeze to people who love talking about the weather, they're like, oh yeah, the breeze is so good. And I think it's also, that's why people say life is a breeze, you know, like, you know, it's a breeze, right? So, but people love that, right? But the thing that I also noticed is that when people, I run into people from high school whenever I visit back home in Ottawa, and I won't see them for like maybe 10, 12 years or something really long. And I was just walking, and I see them, and they're like, oh, hey, Anto, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, hey, it's been a while. And then they ask me this really loaded question. How have you been? I know that seems like a very simple question for most people, but I believe it's because of the anxiety or ADHD, whatever it is that's going on in my life. How have you been is such a loaded question. So I actually, in that moment, because I'm trying to be more authentic, very important to mental health and whatnot, I realized, I was like, okay, I'm actually going to answer this. So they're like, how have you been? I'm like, the first thing I want to say is good, maybe great, either one of those ones, right? So I say good, but then I'm like, also frustrated, angry, happy, joyful, confused, conflicted, emotional, reflective, you know, and I'm saying all of the things that I'm feeling. And then I look up to the person, and they're gone. They're done. I go on this huge rant of how have I been, because the loaded question, it's so many different things, right? And like I said at the beginning, I say good, conflicted, emotional, all these different things. And by the end of it, all I really end up saying is good, right? And that's the challenge of it, is like, what am I actually feeling? And I would challenge everybody to do that. Whenever somebody actually asks you, obviously it's not the common social situation or way of doing it, but maybe with the close friends, people closer to you, maybe actually take some time. Because what I noticed was that whenever I started talking about all the different emotions that I had, it kind of invited the people in my life to also talk about all the different emotions that they have in their lives. And what I noticed is that nobody in my inner circle answers good anymore, because nobody is just good. Nobody's just great. Those are just fabricated surface level things that people have done just to save time, right? Let's get this going. But like socialization to me, that deep connection that many of us are seeking doesn't come from answering good or great. It's like, let's open it up to like all the different emotions. And my goodness, there is so many emotions. So, and at this point, I hope that many people out there understand that like the many emotions that we have is so human. We're so layered, right? And it's important for us to not just look at life in just such a surface level. And that's one of the biggest challenges of social media. That's a very big challenges of like work meeting or connections with people. They ask you, but they don't actually want to know how you really are. So maybe that's something, a prompt of sorts, is maybe out there, ask and actually take the time to get to know the people around you. Because why are we spending so much time with people that we don't even know, right? And that includes ourselves. We spend so much time with ourselves, and a lot of times, watching Netflix or just wasting time, you don't really get to know yourself. And that's one of the most powerful things. I heard earlier people were talking about the idea of going out into nature. I don't know if you've ever hugged a tree before, and literally people call it what they would consider hippies, like tree huggers. But man, the first time I hugged a tree, obviously people around me was like, that guy's taking hiking way too seriously, right? That guy loves nature. But it was just this thing that I had this inclination to do. And I remember hugging a tree, closing my eyes and like actually hugging a tree. I felt so grounded. I felt like connected to the tree's roots. And I'm not going to say that I heard the tree talking to me or anything like that, but I definitely felt some stuff and I felt emotional about it. And also, I felt as if I could talk to the tree as well at that moment, too, right? And also, this is just my way of saying that it's been a really long time since I've felt the touch of another human. that, that is something that I would love to put out there, too, is that hugging a tree is definitely not as satisfying as that, but it's maybe one step towards that. It is very nurturing and connectable in that way. So another thing I wanted to share is I've actually studied being an early childhood educator. So I worked with kids for a long time. And the thing is, like, being a man working with children is like, there's already like a disconnect that you have to create for safety for everybody, right? Because there is always these ideas, and it's very common that people assume that there is some dangers when it comes to inviting a man into an environment where daycares are mostly women, I would say. Sometimes you would see others, but in my class, I had 17 people in my personal class, and then the overall class of 75 people over 4 years, I was the only guy that was in that program. And that's the thing, is that it was very common to only be the only guy. So whenever I would go and pick up the kids from school, that's why I had to make sure that a lot of the other people that were there were Filipina nannies or Asian women and things like this. That's why I had to keep my beard so the kids knew who I was. So I'm just kidding. And that's the thing, is like, it's such an interesting dynamic with kids, right? Because for me, I felt like the kids were saying all the anything that they thought that was too inappropriate to say to the female teachers, they would always end up saying it to me, right? Just the wildest like ideas, things that they had. But also at certain moments, I noticed that there was these like intimate moments of friendship and connection that kids had with me that were also kind of awkward. I'll explain. I was nannying one time with this kid, and or Manny, as people force on me. They're like, "You're." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a caregiver. I'm a nanny." And then people are like, "Say it." I'm like, "Say what?" They're like, "Say it." I was like, "All right, I'm a Manny." They're like, "Yes," they love it, right? And I'm like, I'm not really a Manny. I mean, the only Manny I know is Manny Pacquiao. I'm not really Manny Pacquiao. I'm not able to fight like that. And I guess I'm a Manny, or I take care of kids and stuff like that. But one kid ended up, I brought him to the park, and we were playing, and it was super like good moment. And he comes over and he gives me a huge hug. And in that moment, I obviously know that like if anybody's ever seen the Wiggles, you're wondering why is most of the pictures when Wiggles are being hugged, yet a lot of their hands are up, right? Is because of being a man in this industry. You want to make sure that. But at this time, I had told the mom that, hey, whenever this kid is going to hug me, I'm going to give him a big hug back. And the mom was totally cool with it. The kid was totally cool with that. So I gave this kid a big hug. And then right after, he's like, that was nice, mommy. And then he said, that was, daddy. Oh, I mean, Anto. And it was like this moment of like him just letting out his inhibitions of just like care. But like the people that he was closest to were his mom and then his dad. And then now I felt like I was like welcomed into his inner circle of like care, right? And it was such a sweet moment, but also his face was like, oh, and he's like, I need to go and like throw sticks and rocks and like run around because like that inclined like male like masculine energy of that like kind of shot out. And he was like, oh, I gotta erase this out of my mindset just so that I can like move on, right? So I thought that was such like a interesting but also kind of like sweet moment. But also for him, he was like, oh, that was so strange. I gotta like run away from this, right? And that's the thing is, even for myself, my dad, it's such a strange relationship that me and my father have. So being an Asian man, my dad's dad, my grandfather, was actually not just a principal, he was a superintendent. Like he was literally the one who took care of like all of the schools around, and like so he had like a very serious energy to him, right? So my dad, I learned that they didn't really have that like connection of like deeper, father son energy in that way. It was more so like a stricter like energy, right? Which makes sense. So my dad and I, the first time that I ended up like telling my dad that I love him, it was like, oh, Dad, I love you, because I've been told over and over again that I need to tell the people that I love them, right? By my therapist, clearly a white therapist, because that's normal in white families. It's not normal in immigrant families. We don't tell each other we love each other, right? So she's like, yeah, just go tell the people you love that you love them, right? So I said it to my dad, and my dad said, I'm like, I love you, Dad. And he goes, good. Like if it was a text message, it would be like GOOD period. Like it was just final, right? Like that's the end of the conversation. It's like when I hugged him, like when I started hugging my dad as well too, I'd like be like, all right, come give me a hug. And he'd come in and then I'd give him a big hug and he'd give me the back pat hug, the one that's like, all right, this is over now. Like that's kind of the energy that he would give to me. But also he just gives in a different way. Like when I was actually visiting home, my dad ended up when I had my backpack on, and he's like, "Okay, come upstairs." So I like walked upstairs with him into like his cave of many electronics. Like he's literally been collecting electronics for like 20 years. I saw he has like Wii Fits and Wiis and things like that, right? And so we ended up like I was standing there and like looking at this computer, and my dad is just like it was Kijiji. And there was just a car on the screen there. And he was just like, do you like the car? And I was just like, oh, yeah, that's a nice car. Like, are you thinking of getting it? And he's like, do you want the car? And I was like, I mean, yeah, but like that sounds good. But like, how much is it? Like, what's the cost? Like, how many miles is it? Like, what's going on with like, is it check, like safety check? Like, what's going on with it and stuff? He was just like, well, do you want it? Like, completely bypasses all of my questions. He's like, do you want it? I was like, yeah, okay, let's go look at it. Let's go look at it. And he's like, okay, good. And then we go into the car, and note that he said good the same way that he said good after I told him I loved him. He said good. So we get in the car. I haven't even put my bag down. I still had my bag, and we're now in the car driving towards whatever Kijiji place I was supposed to meet this person. We go and we meet this random old Asian dude. Like he's probably like in his like 70s as well, like just like my dad. And then he has like my dad and him have like this handshake, and then they're just like hugging, and it's like this moment, right? This great moment. And then I'm like, what's going on right now? And he's like, I just bought you this car. And he's like, do you like it? And I was like, you just bought me a car? Like, what are you talking about? Is that like we've said like 10 words to each other, and now I have this car? And he's like, it's a good deal. And then he's like, go say thank you to this guy. And then the dude, I walk over and I like give him a handshake, and the guy gives me a hug, and he's like, you're gonna love the car. My daughter drive it very little. You're gonna love it. And then we're driving back in my car, and it's just like this surreal moment. I'm like trying to process like all of the years of me telling my dad that I love him and him saying good or okay or whatever uncomfortable thing. And I realized at that moment that this was how he was showing me his appreciation and his love for me. And it hit me in this wave of like just so much gratitude of like, oh, like not everybody's going to tell you that they love you with words. They're going to care about you in different ways. But also it was strange as hell. Like, I'm going to just be honest. It was just a surreal moment because I was like, I've been wanting to like connect in this different way. Right. But now he was able to open this up. And when I was leaving to drive back to Toronto, there was a bit of pressure because he was like, make sure you get it checked and it doesn't break down. Right. And I was like, that's so much stress. And then right before I leave, he says this gem of a thing that he says, now you could come home and visit your mom more. And it was just like this moment, and I was like, wow. And then I said, and you too, right? And he's like, oh, and like we actually had this like hug and like care of the moment. And he still backpat hugged me. I'm not gonna lie and like make up some like now we embrace, the greatest hug of all time. No, he still backpat hugged me. But when I was leaving, he stayed on the driveway and had like a really great moment of like goodbye, and it was just such a beautiful thing. And now we actually have like check-ins and he actually the other day he taught me how to make soup. And I've never seen a man like get so excited about sharing how to use a pressure cooker. And also he ended up purchasing me a air fryer as well. So I guess those are the two ways that I'm going to connect to my dad from now on. It's going to be through the car and then through the actual pressure cooker and air fryer. And if that's the only way and it's not through the words and telling each other we love each other, that's going to be completely okay with me. So for all the people that are listening out there, I want you to know that love comes in very different forms. Love comes, and especially love of self, love of the people around you. But however you express it, don't hold back, everybody. You must let the people you know that you love, that you care about them. And so my white therapist was right. So thank you, everybody, for your time. I've been Anto Chan. I absolutely love talking to people, connecting with others. If you want to add me on Instagram, it's Anto Punfu, ANTOPUNFU. And I do love saying that at the end. And also on LinkedIn is also another way you can connect to me, Anto Chan. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have an amazing day. And the sun is totally shining right now. Hope you have such a wonderful time, whatever it is that you do today. All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks for that, Anto. Before you leave, I want to make some comments about the posters you have behind you. I'm a person that notices details.
Oh, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the posters behind you? It says intergenerational, and you've got Mama, Baby Gaga, and you've got something else. Can you tell us what's going on back there?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, Joe, you are a man of culture. You get it. This is my life's work. I love doing this. So Baby Gaga is my name in Instagram is Anto Punfu. Punfu is like, I love jokes. I love puns, right? And I didn't share any today, but like hopefully in the future we'll be able to share some as well. But this one is Baby Gaga, and it's actually like connected with Lady Gaga, but we just made her a baby, and you can see the blocks and stuff like that. So that's the first one. Big shout out to my cousin Luke, who's a family member who made the art on that. Secondly, my cousin also created this poster for my show, for my show Intergenerational. And actually, let me just bring it down here. You'll be able to see. So this is actually my grandparents, and then these are my 5 aunts. And so what's so interesting is, especially being on an International Men's Day project that we're doing right now, is also the value of the women in my life, right? Being able to connect to your masculine, connect to your strength as a man also comes from our relationships with women, right? And so for me, this is always, it's got my back, my grandparents and my aunts are here with me and whatnot. And then also I'm living in my grandparents' home that they lived in until they passed. So for me, it's like a very near and dear project for me, because I talk about intergenerational trauma. I talk about the intergenerational healing and all the gifts that my grandparents were actually able to give me throughout the years of their lives, right? And then finally, I'll share this. This is a collage that I made. So I just love collage, and I love being able to like create art. And if anybody out there doesn't know what art medium to use, collage is an amazing one, because you literally just cut images that you like, and then you just glue it onto a page, and whatever happens, happens. You never really know. So that's all the art that I have. And it says, bring the beauty. For me, it was the beginning of doubt. Approach him. He likes, oh, this is my favorite. Approach him. He likes to listen. And that's something that I would like to welcome to all. Yes, I love talking, and you saw me talk 15, 20 minutes right there. But I also really love to listen. And that's a huge thing that Joe, you were mentioning before, the 2 ears and the one mouth. It is so valuable to listen, because what ends up happening when you listen is that you are opening yourself up to curiosity. You're opening yourself up to actual information that other people have lived experiences in. And they are not always just wanting to tell you what to do. They are also opening up that discussion to listen to your input as well. So thank you again, Joe, for having me on this. I love the messages that you've been highlighting, and I love your presence. And by the way, I want to thank all of our sponsors for today. They've been really great. So take care, man.
Yes, don't leave quite yet. I like the ideas you brought up about hugging the trees, Mr. Manny.
Yes.
And I love you, Dad. And he said, good. And that was interesting. Your dad seems like he lacks emotions, but you wanted to be generous and compassionate. Do you want the car? Do you like the car? Okay, I'll go buy it for you. You didn't know he was going to buy it for you. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
You did. I like the long story you gave about asking someone how you doing, because I've used this story many times. On YouTube, there's a little clip from the movie Italian Job where Donald Sutherland asks Mark Wahlberg, how are you? And Mark Wahlberg says, fine. And then Donald Sutherland says, fine? Yeah, I know, Mark says. Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. That's what fine stands for.
Yeah.
So I've learned through my own experiences, if you ask someone how they're doing, they say it's fine, they're doing crap. Or if they say good or not too bad, they're doing terrible.
Yes,
if they won the lotto 649, won 150 million, they're not going to say fine. They're not going to say good or not too bad. It's a whole different story. So I think that's quite brilliant. What languages do you speak?
Okay,
other
so I'm sorry?
What other than English? What other languages?
Yeah, so I actually speak English, I speak Cantonese, and I speak French. So I was born in Montreal, and then my parents are from Hong Kong, so they speak Cantonese, and we spoke throughout my whole life. And then, English was, but I actually learned English last. So I learned Cantonese first with my family when I was like really young. After I was born, they spoke to me Cantonese to make sure it was in me. And then I also in like daycare and whatnot, I was learning French. And then when I moved to Ontario when I was about 4 years old, it was much more English and it was very interesting, like language learning. But it was from a very young age that I learned Cantonese with my family. And it still is the language that whenever I'm in trouble or like serious conversations, that's the language that my mom and dad would speak to me. So I'm very grateful that I understand it much better than I speak it. But I love that I understand it so I can get the intricacies of their connection and their like someone speaking their own language that they grew up with is so different than trying to translate everything in your mind. Just like us, if we learn another language, the translation kind of takes away from the passion or the depth of it.
Well, I agree. I grew up knowing German before I knew English. So it's interesting. I'd like to learn Chinese or Cantonese or Mandarin because I meet a lot of different people. I go occasionally to a Chinese restaurant. I had an interesting experience with a friend. We ordered the food, the soup, the rice, and the vegetables. And I said, the waitress, where's our forks, knives, and spoons? And she came back and she said, there's your fork and spoon. I wasn't sure if I should say that one.
It's all good. I liked it.
So thanks so much for coming.
I'm going to put this out to you, Joe, and this is something that you might not know, but that was actually a compliment that they didn't put the forks and spoons and knives and plates on your table because they thought that you would be able to handle the chopsticks and the bowl. So that's actually a compliment for you. So just letting you know that. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, we've got another comedian, but before
Okay.
we go to the next comedian, we need to have another notice from one of our sponsors, and that is Voice of Men 360 Body Wash. And as a man, you definitely want to smell good, fresh, don't you? Well, make sure you stock up on Voice of Men 360 Body Wash because it'll keep you feeling fresh and invigorated for 23 hours. Because again, remember, us men all deserve some time for ourselves. So you'll have that extra hour for yourself. And I want to introduce our fourth comedian. His name is Frank King. He is a suicide prevention speaker, a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years, believe it or not. He's a full-time stand-up comedian. I'm sure he sits down sometimes. For 37 years, he's fought a lifetime battle with depression, chronic suicidality, turning that long, dark journey into 8 TED Talks and insights of mental health awareness. Only one other person on the planet has 8 TED Talks, and that's Bill Gates. Depression and suicide run his family. He's thought about killing himself more times than he can count. He's come close enough to dying by suicide. He can tell you what the barrel of his guns tastes like. He uses his life lessons to start the conversation, giving people hope. So, where is Frank? We'd love to hear from Frank. There he is.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Can
Yes.
you hear me now? Yes, I'm Frank King. I am the mental health comedian. That is my brand. And the elephant in the room when I speak, as you might imagine, is wait a minute, a comedian talking about depression, thoughts of suicide. How does that work? I think a comedian's a good choice, and I'll tell you why. You think about it, the world's first comedians were who? Court jesters. And what was the court jester's job? Speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip with humor. I believe where there's humor, there is hope. Where there's laughter, there is life, that nobody truly dies laughing. And depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And I myself have come close enough to ending my life that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, literally. Now, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. At which point, most people in the audience have a kind of a nervous laugh. And I go, it's okay to laugh. I said, and a friend of mine came up to me after a recent keynote. He'd never heard me say I didn't pull the trigger out loud. And he said this, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, can you try to sound slightly less disappointed? Uh, so the reason I didn't pull the trigger was I had $1 million life insurance policy. And my wife and I just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lost everything we'd worked for in 25 years. This is the last recession. And I don't know if you speak for a living, you know that in 2007, 8, and 9, speaking business dropped off 80% overnight. And we lost everything. And I had $1 million life insurance policy. And you may or may not know this, but one of the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool of suicidality is burdensomeness. You feel like the world would be better off without you. And I knew that my wife would be better off, certainly financially, without me. I know she'd be brokenhearted, but she wouldn't be broke. I could restore her to, you know, solid financial ground. I think if I'd given her the choice, she would hopefully have said, no, don't pull the trigger. We'll work out the finances. But that's what I was thinking. The problem was, having sold insurance when I came out of college, right out of college, I knew that my life insurance policy had a 2-year suicide clause, meaning if I killed myself in the first 24 months, it paid nothing. If I'd waited 24 months and a day, it paid $1 million. So I had to call my insurance agent and find out how long I'd had the policy. So, as with most people who live with mental illness, I'm a great actor. And so, just in passing, just almost as an aside in the conversation, hey, Graham, how long have I had that policy? And he goes, I don't know. I'll check. I could hear him clacking on the keys. He comes back and he goes, it's been 22 months. And then it hit him what I was really asking. I wasn't asking just how long I'd had the policy. I was asking for permission to pull the trigger. So he said, 22 months and no, don't do it. And I didn't, as you can probably tell. Now, when I did my first TEDx talk, and that story's in there. It's my origin story, my mental health origin story. After it posted on YouTube, I called Graham back. And I said, I mentioned you in the YouTube video. And he said, Frank, that day I thought for sure you were going to kill yourself. I told my wife when I hung up the phone that I thought you'd kill yourself. And he said, when you asked me about how long you'd had the policy, and I realized what you were really asking me, that you asking for permission to kill yourself, he said, I said a quick prayer that whatever I said next made a difference. And I said, Graham, oftentimes with mental health, mental illness, and thoughts of suicide, it's not always what you say, it's that you stepped out of your comfort zone and said something. That's the key. And as I said, I am still here, and I'm in part due to my insurance agent, who was also a friend. Uh, as I mentioned, my grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My grandmother, my family has depression and and thoughts of suicide. We're just it's in our DNA. Somebody said, "Will you ever be cured?" No, not unless we can switch up my DNA in some way. Um, my mother couldn't reach my grandmother on the phone. Knew she was winding down mentally, so drove over. And my grandmother had taken care of everything. She had paid the bills, stamped the envelopes, put them on the kitchen counter. She pinned her will to her housecoat so my mother could find it. And she closed all the windows and doors, turned on the old gas stove, blew out the pilot light, and sat down at the kitchen table and wrote her suicide note. My great aunt, 9 years later, who was also winding down mentally, my mother couldn't reach her on the phone. So she got panicked. So she bundled me into the car at 4 years old, and we drove over and we let ourselves in. And I will spare you the details because they are horror movie horrible. But I will say that my grandmother ended her life with the old gas stove. My great aunt ended her life with an old Loctite refrigerator. And in my first TEDx talk, I said to the audience, my grandmother, uh, a stove, my great aunt, an old Loctite refrigerator. What is it with my family and major appliances? I drive past Sears, I tear up. I also said in my first TEDx talk, because every TEDx talk should have some humor. And people ask me, you tell jokes about depression and suicide? No, no, I tell funny personal stories. I said, as I was preparing for the first TEDx, I went on TED.com, figuring, there'd probably be 3 or 4 dozen, maybe more talks on suicide. And out of all the hundreds of thousands of ones that are on there. And there were just three talks on suicide. And I said to the audience, well, then it hit me. Listen, if you're really good at suicide, chances are you are not going to be recording a TEDx talk. I live with two mental illnesses. One is called major depressive disorder. It's generally not situational. It's like a wheel with a flat spot. Every now and again, the flat spot comes up. Last 3 days. My cycle is 72 hours. And if you're living with depression, here's my advice. I used to fight it. I used to say I fight depression, and I realized I cannot win. I can lose and kill myself or tie and stay alive, but I cannot win. So I stopped fighting it. I know my cycle 72 hours. When the wave of depression comes, I get on what I call my crazy surfboard, and I surf the wave of depression for 72 hours, knowing that in about 72 hours the wave's going to break and I'll be flying level again shortly. So I no longer fight depression. People go, that's your identity. You're depressed. I go, no, it's not my identity. It's part of my identity, along with my other mental illness, which is far more rare. And this, what I'm about to tell you, may save a life today on this podcast. I have chronic suicidal ideation. Chronic suicidal ideation, also known as chronic suicidality. And what it means is for people like me, people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new one. 3, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. The upside of telling that story at every keynote that I do is this. Since 2014, at almost every keynote I've given, there's been one person in the audience who has chronic suicidal ideation. Invariably, they don't know it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and completely alone. And a young woman came up to me after my college, one of my college presentations, and said, I want to thank you for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She goes, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. How did it make you weep? She said, your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new one, or kill yourself? I've been having those thoughts all my life. I had no idea that had a name. I thought I was just some kind of freak and completely alone. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I'm not alone, and I wept. Yeah, that's the ROI. That's the return on investment when I speak. And somebody said to me, does it trigger you to tell your story over and over? Because, as a man, and men tend not to share these feelings, it's the reason in the United States that 8 out of 10 suicides right now are men, because as we used to say down south when I was a kid, southern United States, big boys don't cry. And the problem with that is they don't reach out for help. They pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They're men. They got to be tough. They got to, so forth and so on. So it's unusual. It's unusual to see someone, a man such as myself, non-clinician. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I have training in suicide prevention and several certifications. But see a man on stage being vulnerable, and that is my superpower. I am vulnerable on stage. I share my story to give people in the audience permission to give voice to theirs. And so what happens when I speak is I do a general 15 minutes or so Q&A, and I tell the audience before we start that, look, if you got a question you want to ask or a story you want to share, and you don't want to share it in front of everybody, I'll hang out. And sometimes there's 2 people lined up, and sometimes there's 10. And most of the conversations start like this. I've never told anybody this. I get that a lot. What I have found in my mental health journey and mental health speaking journey is even though one person dies by suicide every 9 minutes in the US, every 40 seconds worldwide, hardly anybody talks about it unless you bring it up. And then almost everybody's got a story. This afternoon, I am flying from my home to Orlando, Florida to catch a cruise ship. I'm doing stand up comedy on a cruise ship for the next week over Thanksgiving. I was working a cruise ship. I don't even remember the year. And I went into the Lido buffet because most of them have a Lido buffet, and I could not find a place to sit. Now, I had done a show before, so, people sort of recognized me when I came in. And I saw a table for 2, a woman and an empty chair. So I pointed, she nodded, I sat. She looks up, she goes, "Hey, are you the comedian?" I go, "Hey, did you enjoy the comedy show?" She goes, "I did." I said, "Then I'm the comedian." She starts to laugh. She goes, "What would you have said if I told you I hated the comedy show?" I would say, they say I look a lot like him. She asked me a question many cruise passengers ask me. Is cruise comedy all you do? No. No, I only do it 10 or 12 weeks a year. The rest of the time, I'm a public speaker, I said. And you know what? If you don't mind me bragging, I just nailed down my first TEDx talk. She goes, "I love the TEDx talks. What's the topic?" Now, I'd had this conversation many times, so I thought I knew what was coming. I said to her, "Depression and suicide," and started a countdown in my head. 3, 2, 1. Sure enough, she didn't disappoint. Frank, I've tried to kill myself twice. We have literally just met. She's seen me on stage, but we haven't had more than 90 seconds of a conversation, and she told me something she's probably rarely told anybody else. She said the first time was kind of half-hearted in college, not a big deal. Second time, Frank, far more serious. I graduated college. I graduated medical school. I had the knowledge, had the equipment, had the IV started in my ankle. Suicide cocktail in one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up, and the phone rings. "Oh," she said, "do I answer it?" Well, I better. It might be somebody who would come over and interrupt. Picks up the phone. It's her 13-year-old son. And she said, "I don't know if he heard something in my voice or had a premonition, but Frank," he said, "Mom, don't do anything." So I decided I would not die by suicide that day. I did not give up on the idea of suicide, but I was not going to do it that day because I knew he'd always feel guilty. Wasn't there something he could say or do to stop my suicide? Here's the good news. There are things you can say, there are things you can do to stop a suicide because 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent, cannot make up their mind. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt, which means the vast majority of people can be saved. The vast majority of people want to be saved. You can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is starting the conversation if you know how. And before we part company, I'll give you some tips on knowing how to spot the signs of depression and thoughts of suicide. So I said to her, how old is he now? She said he's 21. I said, "Does he know his phone call saved your life?" She goes, "No. How do you start that conversation?" And I thought that's going to be the theme of my TEDx, and that's going to be the theme of my mental health speaking is start the conversation, break the silence, break the stigma, and save lives. That's it. Things that we remain silent about. Silence in mental health is a killer, especially among men, because they tend not to. You pretty much have to put a man in a corner to have him get therapy. The spouse says, "Look, honey, I love you, but I'm not going to put myself and these kids through this. You get therapy or we're gone." Or a boss, "Look, we have a mental health program in our employee assistance program, and either you get in it or don't bother coming back in on Monday." So now that said, once a man has bought in generally he's all in and oftentimes willing to help other men. As a matter of fact, I'm a co author on a 4-book series on men's mental health. Each one is an anthology, each one 12 stories, 12 guys, and how they're coping with whatever problem they're coping with. Because men tend to take advice from men. My wife would tell you she could give me a Nobel Prize winning idea and I would poo poo it. But if the mailman told me the same thing, I'm all over it. So we figured if we had stories of men, real problems, and how they're really handling them, other men might pick up the book, see their problem, realize another guy's doing something to cope, and figure I can do that. And we figured we'd be lucky to get 12 guys to be honest and upfront about what they were struggling with because men are so tight lipped about these things. Well, what was 1 book became 4 books because over 60 men came forward to help other men. It's some kind of male reciprocity. So the books are called Guts, Grit, and the Grind. Guts, Grit, and the Grind. They're all on Amazon. If you go to my website, The Mental Health Comedian, or as we say down south, The Mental Health Comedian, I should be able to download the first book, audiobook, unabridged for free, and unnarrated. Anyway, where was I in the story? Cruises. As I said, I'm going to be going on a cruise shortly, flying out today. And there may be something you don't know about cruises. The longer the cruise, the older the passenger. Generally speaking, the longer the cruise, the older the passenger. Last year, I did 10 days on a 115-day world cruise. 115 days. We're talking old people and their parents. Every night, same thing for dessert. Oxygen. Oh, yeah. If I heard it once, heard half dozen times. Clear. Oh, yeah. Medevac helicopters coming and going from that boat like bees from a hive. Darling, darling people. After a show, this little lady came up and she said, and this happens all the time, you want to hear our favorite joke at the senior center? And part of my job is public relations. So I said, sure, Grandma, hit me. She goes, okay, there's a little lady standing in front of the room at the senior center with her fist balled up like this. Says the gentlemen who are gathered, if any of you boys guess what's in my hand, I'll spend the night with you. After about 30 seconds, an old guy in the back yells out, it's an elephant. And she goes, close enough. That's why I always listen to Grandma's jokes. Because next morning in the Lido buffet, elderly woman tapped me on the shoulder. Frank, do you want another old lady joke? Absolutely. She goes, okay, there are 2 elderly women on a tour bus, long tour, like 6 hours. About halfway, 3 hours in, one elderly woman says to the other, I think my fanny fell asleep. And the second woman says to the first, yes, I think I heard it snoring. Oh, man. That's not my favorite joke on the 115-day world cruise, by the way. I have a bit in my act about I speak at a lot of conventions and conferences, and every industry has a favorite joke. For example, the ophthalmologist's favorite joke, or optometrist, the people who make glasses, test your eyes, their favorite joke is this. Here's my impression of an ophthalmologist or optometrist making love. How's that? How about now? Better? Worse? 1 or 2? And if you've never worn glasses, ask somebody because that's funny. I did a show for the Selected Independent Funeral Homes, an international show. And again, every industry has a favorite joke. And I was talking to the meeting planner about 30 days before I did my presentation. She goes, "What do you call your motivational speech for for morticians?" And I was kidding. I said I call it thinking inside the box. And you know what? They made me call it that because they liked it so much. Well, anyway, I told the joke and I asked the audience on the cruise ship, anybody here a mortician? And a guy in the balcony raised his hand. And I go, what is your name, sir? And he goes, it's Musgrove, Musgrove. And I said, Miss Musgrove, what's a mortician doing on a 115-day world cruise? Okay, get this. He stands up and goes, inventory? Boom. He got a standing ovation. Now, let me leave you this because the gentleman before me mentioned this. Has somebody living with mental illness? Oftentimes, when somebody asks me how I'm doing, I want to tell them, especially if I'm tired and a little editor in my head's gone to sleep. I crawled into an Uber one day after 2-3 hour suicide prevention presentations, exhausted. The nice young man behind the wheel said, hey, man, how you doing? I thought I'm going to tell him. I'm depressed and suicidal. How about you? Freeze, he does. Then he says, what am I supposed to say to that? I said, do you really want to know? He goes, yeah. I said, you're supposed to ask me if I have a plan. So He asked me, do you have a plan? And then it hits him. And he turns in his seat and he goes, does it involve Uber? Well done. Listen, I promised you signs and symptoms, and I'm not going to disappoint you because I've done radio, and you don't tease something you don't complete. So, top 3 depression signs, my top 3 are eat too much, can't eat, sleep too much, can't sleep. Has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, so late for school or work, but rallies in the afternoon. 3, lets their personal hygiene go. Usually they're pretty well put together, but this day their hair is dirty, their clothes aren't so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed to run a little wash and take a shower. Now, signs of thoughts of suicide, even harder to spot, but here's the ones I think stand out. 1, they talk about death and dying, or they Google death and dying, or death and dying appears as a theme in their artwork, their music, or their writing. They're getting their affairs in order, giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And of course, acquiring the means, buying a firearm or stockpiling medications. Here's one that's extremely dangerous and counterintuitive. They've been depressed forever, and all of a sudden they're happy beyond reason, for no reason. Well, they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain, which, by the way, suicide is most about pain, not about wanting to kill yourself. It's about ending the pain. They know the pain is coming to an end. So let me leave you this. What do you say to somebody who lets on that they're suicidal? Do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed time, place, and method, you need to get them to a mental health facility for evaluation and perhaps medication. You can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is starting a conversation.
I think that was fantastic. I took a lot of notes here. We need another hour to review all my notes. That's awesome. You're confronting things a lot of people are too scared to talk about. So I admire, respect that you're focusing on what you had struggled with now to help other people overcome their struggles and depression and suicide. So there's lots I wrote here, notes, amazing. So the books, again, I think would be something to consider. Maybe we can have you come back and I can interview an author circle.
Yeah.
The book's Guts, Grind, Grit and Grind. Is that, just tell us quickly before we leave a little bit about the books.
Guts, Grit, and the Grind. It's a mental mechanics manual. It looks like an automobile owner's manual. We did that, so we figured guys might actually pick it up. It's full of automobile metaphors like, don't you wish the man in your life had a check engine light? So when the light goes on, he went down to the mental mechanic, the guy puts him up on the rack and goes, Bob, of course you're depressed. You're 2 quarts low on serotonin. So it's automobile metaphors, funny, and it's full of exercises, resources. We have 9 cats. Sorry about that. Exercises, resources, and things that men can do, and coping. Teaching men how to cope as other men are coping.
Do you have pictures of the books or the books you could show people quickly?
Do not.
Okay. Well, so it's Guts, Grit, and Grind, and there's how many different volumes?
4 volumes.
4.
Guts, Grit, and Grind. 4 volumes. You can get them on Amazon. Just type in Guts, Grit, and Grind, and you'll find it.
Okay, perhaps we can put it up so people can find it. Well, I'm greatly appreciative of all the people that came to these guests. We had a great time. It's been enjoyable, and we hope to have another one next year. And we'll keep you informed what other events we have. And Voice of Men 360, there's a long list. So we went over a little bit over time, but it was well worth it. Now we see your cat as well. So.
Yes.
And I hope everybody has an enjoyable day. But before you go, I just want to review. We have some great specials on our men's deodorant and our body wash. So they are good for 23 hours because each man deserves an hour to himself. So have an awesome day today, November 19th, 2022. It was quite enjoyable hosting the show today. And have a wonderful day. And remember, International Men's Day. For more information, you can check Wikipedia. There's many pages with lots of details. God bless everybody. Take care and keep smiling. Have fun today.